everyone. I'm Alicia Greenberg with the Advertising Club of New York. On behalf of the club, our president, Gina Grillo, and our member partner company, Broadsign, thank you for being here with us today. It's so good when we see you in person. I'm always grateful for that, especially these days. And for those of you who are joining us online, welcome to the virtual clubhouse up there. It's been a hell of a busy start to this year, right? And that's why we're committed to keeping the community connected. No matter where you are, you get to tune in with us because we're a virtual clubhouse first and foremost, and we'll be that for the foreseeable future. Today, Rick, it's our 10th episode in our Conversations with series, where Ad Club Board Chair Rick Song interviews thought leaders in our membership about pressing topics of the day, but also what I love about this is having the intimate, more personal take on things, which is what we pride ourselves on. And today, we're thrilled to have that with the CMO of Cadillac, Melissa Grady Diaz. Thank you for being here with us. Before we start, I want to encourage those of you, there are a couple here and some online that are not members, to join us. It's really easy to do. Just go online, theadvertisingclub.org, or write to me, Alicia, at theadvertisingclub.org. Meet some of my colleagues here today. We'd love to have you part of our community. We are dedicated to educating, celebrating, and empowering we have now over 6,000 members, which is really outstanding. We've really kept the community tethered even through COVID. And when I say empower, what's really important right now, while I have you, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you and your companies to post any jobs, open jobs that you have at your organizations on our website. Right now, it's free to post, and we know sometimes that can cost a lot of money, but we have a lot of breadth, depth, and scope in our community. So please, if you have open jobs, post it, whether you're members or not. We also have a lot coming up. We have our Conversations with Continues with Cheryl Guerin of MasterCard is here on March 15th. And our Innovate New York series, where we take deep dives into technology, is coming up on March 30th. It's sponsored by YieldMo. And we know for sure right now, Taryn Lance of Walmart will be here with us. It's a webinar. So again, no matter where you are, you can chime in for that. To find out more about these events, it's on our site. We reach out to you, all that good stuff. And if you want to socialize information from today's session, tag us at @ClubNY. Of course, we couldn't feed you and do all these things if it wasn't for our partner companies who are thought leaders in their own rights, as our members are. We have with us today Broadsign Senior Account Executive of Programmatic Digital Out of Home, Mike Hammer. So Mike, why don't you come up and take it from here? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alicia. Broadsign is beyond excited to be sponsoring today's Ad Club Speaker Series. For those who have yet to learn about Broadsign, we are a leader in the digital out-of-home space. We seek to remove the friction in digital out-of-home planning and buying process through free planning tools, several DSP integrations for our supply, and a purpose-built DSP for self or managed service activations. On top of that, nearly two-thirds of all digital screen owners across the globe use our software to power their screens. Here's a quick video showing you how Broadsign lights up the world. Take it away.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Great to see you all here. Great to see so many familiar faces as well. So excited you're going to get a chance to get to know Melissa today and hear about the transformative work she's doing at Cadillac. She also happens to be a personal friend, so this is like an extra treat for me. Before we get started, some questions for some audience participation. Who here has not heard of Cadillac? Okay, that was a trick question. How many of you have had a personal experience or know someone who's had a personal experience with the Cadillac brand? Okay, so pretty much everyone. Some trivia for you. Anyone know what year Cadillac was founded?
If you don't, I have a hint.
Everyone can answer except Melissa and any of her agencies. 1902.
Last year was our 120th anniversary.
That's right, 100.
Yes.
Congrats. Anyone know who its founder was? Not even the Detroit people? Okay.
It's not that far off.
Henry Leland. And then finally, anyone know what the Cadillac brand is named, who it's named after? Okay. Antoine de la Motte, Cadillac,
Yes.
who is, anyone know who that is? There you go.
I was like, come on, Detroit crew.
Come on, Detroit people. I was going to say, I mean, what's the authenticity of your Detroit background? Thank you for being here, Melissa. So excited. Before we get into talking about Cadillac, and clearly one of the most well-known, iconic brands in American history, let's get give the members an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Right? You've had long, storied history working from brands.
Long.
I think I'm longer, but that's okay. Jaguar Land Rover to Motorola to MetLife, and then kind of back into automotive at Cadillac. But give everyone kind of your backstory and what kind of brought you into advertising as a marketer.
Yeah, to me, it's an interesting story, hopefully to all of you. But there's parts of it that are exactly what I expected in life, and there are parts of it that are such a surprise to me. So growing up, I was a very strange child on a lot of levels, probably not surprising. But I always knew I wanted to be in advertising. And so whereas other, people might have been, I want to be a policewoman, I want to be an astronaut, whatever, I wanted to be in advertising. And when I was younger and I used to put on plays, I used to make commercial breaks. And so my cousins had to act out my commercials and my parents would watch them. So it was a funny thing going through. I just going into college, I was like, okay, I'm going to do advertising. As I look back now, it's another interesting thing, and I think about how media influences us. Growing up, my dad worked for Chicago MBD, which became Chase, and then for IBM, doing basically he was what would be called today a CIO, but he started before that was really a thing. And so I used to go to the office with him, and I used to love to write on his whiteboards, and I knew I wanted to work in an office. And as I look at things that I watched on TV, the big things where women were working was Who's the Boss? Angela, I wanted to be Angela, and I'm like, I wonder how much early on that played into it. And then Terry Garr, Mr. Mom, right? She kicked ass, and she went in and did these advertising, and I didn't know what it meant, but I liked what they were doing, and I knew I wanted that kind of thing. As it turns out, and I think about other things, it's not like I ended up in the wrong career path because of these women. There was also Claire Huxtable, who was a lawyer, and it's, I've taken a few legal classes. I leave that to the lawyers. So I'm where I'm supposed to be, but it's an interesting thing as I reflect. So going into college, I knew I wanted to be in advertising. I was at DePaul in the business school, and as soon as I hit my prerequisites and could take an advertising class, I walked in, and someone who was probably my first mentor, and I'm still friends with, was a professor who was my advertising professor, and I said, this is what I want to do. Little me, and she really helped me a lot during the class, and I think, interesting, it probably wasn't as innate to me as some other things. I may be more naturally acclimated to math, but I just really love this, and so she helped develop me, and I had to work at it. And then she suggested that I go into this program at Northwestern that was pretty new for integrated marketing. And that's where I really discovered my passion. And it was by accident, because when I went into that program, I went into advertising. And right before I joined, someone who was a student at the time said, have you thought about like this direct thing? This was in the 90s, so like direct or database or any of like what we know today was just starting. And he said, if you learn these skills, you'll know them because you have to learn them. You're going to take advertising as well, so then you'll have flexibility. And I fell in love with understanding technology, statistics, how that can predict human behavior, and you can create good creative off that insight. That's the long part of the story, but it sets us up to, that's what got me into all of the roles that I had. Coming out of grad school, I wanted to work for American Express. In the late 90s, if you were doing any kind of database marketing, that's where you went. And I had a job offer there. I was all set to move to New York. And Jaguar Land Rover, and since you've read through that, we know how the story ends, but they asked to interview me, and I actually wasn't even going to go to the interview. And I think one of the lessons I've really learned is always have conversations, always be open to what may come your way. Because at the school they said, well, we don't want to turn down people. Can you just go talk to them? And I was like, oh yeah, I just didn't want to waste their time. I'm happy to have a conversation. And within 5 minutes, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And it was very interesting. And I think another lesson I've learned is, trust yourself, jump into it, because they didn't have an acquisition or a retention program. They didn't have a database, and they needed to build it all out. And I'm sitting there in the back of my head going, I've done case studies. Like, I've never done this. But if you're going to let me do it, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I just jumped in, and you're going to figure it out. Like, you don't need to know. You didn't know how to do anything when you started it, right? And like, our industry changes so much, you have to constantly be learning, because what programmatic is today isn't what digital advertising was 15 years ago. And so whatever you're learned, you're constantly learning. And so that was my first job. And then I went to, I was at Chiat for a little bit. I went to Motorola for a very long time. And then when I left there, came to MetLife, and just like I've loved everything that I've done.
It's interesting. So by the way, I used to make ads when I was a kid too. Back in the day of VHS, we used to tape ads. That's the reason we're sitting here today. I used to tape ads with my buddies, and then we'd voice over our own voices and make up totally different words to the ads. With VHS, for anyone who remembers that technology. So I love that. So you really had a right brain fascination with advertising, and then as you got into it, applied your left brain competencies to it. Fascinating. So, and you mentioned a stop in the agency side, but really majority of the career so far in brands. What do you like most about it? What brought you to Cadillac?
It's interesting when I look at agency versus brand. There's things that I really love about both. The thing that I loved at the agency is that the product is human beings. Like, what a beautiful thing. Like, your brain, how you think about things, how you're going to solve problems. So I love that, and I love that side of the business. I have been on the brand side. I think there's not one side or the other, I think, that even suits me better. But I think just given my track record of going in and solving problems and getting things done has attracted brands to me. And I do really like that too. So I think that's like probably why I've landed there. But it wasn't on purpose.
Well, I mean, clearly transformation is in your DNA, right? And the things you're bringing to such an iconic brand. So let's jump into Cadillac. Two of the things that stand out if anyone's paying attention to what's happening at Cadillac. One is the new audiences they're reaching, right? Speaking to Gen Z audiences, not necessarily something people would associate with Cadillac historically. And then secondly, the move to kind of an all-EV future, which is also transformative and very outspoken for an automotive brand. Before we chat, I think we're going to show a spot.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a little brief before Michael cues that spot up?
Yeah, so this spot is like where we are currently in the Lyric campaign. We've had an evolution as we've gone from, it being 2 years out and just letting people know we had EV coming through the ordering process and getting pre-sales. And so now it's in market, and we're really, I think, trying to just get a lot of awareness about where Cadillac's going into EV. I'll talk a little bit after the spot about the transformation we're going through, but going into EV, we really, actually I'll just do it now and then I'll show the spot because it'll help.
Okay. Michael, whenever you're ready.
Ready for a superstar. Got my engines on. Tonight at 7, 6 o'clock. You see my rocket ship right up in the clouds when the spaceship lit at night. Hit me from the ground, I'm about to live. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So that is a lot of where the Cadillac work is today. And how we got there is this, and you see the color, you feel the energy in the music. As we started this EV transformation, it was really interesting going back a few years because we started producing things, and as a brand, I'd say we knew who we were. We have known who we are. Our brand values are bold, optimistic, and sophisticated, and that has been for a long time. And you have to have all of them, right? Very, very bold, but you can't be so bold that you're not still sophisticated. Otherwise, we get out of luxury. But leaning into that for EV, what started to happen is, and we had a few assets that we created, and it was very green and peaceful, and you think EV, sustainability, and it wasn't our brand territory. And so I said, we've got to this is not who we are. So let's take a step back and let's look at who we are as a brand. And this has really led the transformation that we're on. And the interesting thing is, to figure out where the future is, we had to go back to the past. And it's so interesting to me that brands and companies have a DNA. They have a way they operate. They have the person they are. And you can't go too far off that. So going into this process, we had a planner who asked the question, if Cadillac vanished from the world, what would be missing? So simple and so powerful, because what would be missing, and I'll say it and it rings true, an American icon. If you think back to what Cadillac has been through Motown, for presidents, for different celebrities, even international dignitaries, it's this American icon. And it's a symbol of the American dream. And I think, you started with saying who has interacted with Cadillac, who has a story. How many of those stories are, and I'm trying to change the conversation to it being yours and not your dad or grandfather's or your uncle's, but how many of those stories came to this country, did whatever they were doing, worked their way through, really created something themselves, and then to celebrate that moment of achievement, it was a Cadillac. And there's so many stories that we have like that, and it's this beautiful place that we have as a brand. And so that's where we started. We said,
Elvis Presley,
exactly.
right? When he hit it big, he bought his mom a pink Cadillac. Anybody remember that?
Exactly. We're woven into the fabric of history here. And so we took that to go into the future. And what does that look like? That is bold color. That is music that makes you want to move. And that's how we got to where we are. So now we don't have a color. Mm-hmm. Color is infused. And so this was the red spot. We have a gold spot. Even the earlier lyric work, you see the golden hour is just really played up and reflecting. So that's how we got to that spot. And the other thing that I think is really important in what we do is that we think about, what's happening in culture and how do we make an impact. And so that was Labyrinth. And, at the moment, and he's an amazing artist. He does all the music for Euphoria. Mm-hmm. And so we were
So very very intentional partnership with Labyrinth.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Very cool. So speaking of music, you also last year also worked with Killer Mike and a bunch of NFT artists, Nyla Hayes, for example, for the Escalade 5 Black Future campaign. Want to talk a little bit about it? Maybe set this up and we'll show the audience a spot?
Yeah, I can. This one, when we show it, I think this is one of the most beautiful spots we've ever created. It's Killer Mike came in as like a more artistic. He with Run the Jewels was our song for a very long time before we moved into EV. And when you look at him as a human being, he's someone. His father was a police officer. He's always been very involved with the community. He does a lot of philanthropic work, a lot of trying to financially help a lot of the community, like through enablement and education. And so we've partnered with him on quite a few things. Coming into June, Black Music Month, he wanted us to help save the music. And so we partnered with him and let him take a little bit of the creative reins. And so when you see the spot, this is how he envisions art playing out in Atlanta. And I think that it's beautiful. I'm weirdly, because it was really like him, but I'm very proud of where it landed. And then we worked with Nyla, and it's her art that you see on the buildings. And we auctioned off the NFTs and then gave that money to the Save the Music Foundation to help support during that month. So
Amazing, amazing.
Let's show the spot.
Okay, Michael?
The future is written by the innovators, the creators, the beautifully defiant muses and makers, the bold, brilliant, bespoke shapers of a marvelous universe. If you look, you will see we're the hook and the verse, a constant chorus of black joy. A magical symphony of undeniable promise. Look in the mirror of your future. What do you see? What do you hear? The world is your instrument. Play it your way. All right, class, today we will experience the power of music.
I want to drive through his mind for a day.
So cool. Very innovative kind of look and feel to the work. Really great. Who is the agency doing the work?
That was with Spike.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, and then I know because I'm a tennis fan, amazing activation at the U.S. Open last year, right? That's a new one, right?
That is new for us, yeah.
Which is super cool. More things on the. So, what can we expect for Cadillac in the coming year and beyond?
So I think we're going to be, for quite a few years now, but we'll be back at the U.S. Open and have a little bit more time for that activation. Since a lot of you are in New York and hopefully a lot of you online can go visit, we have something called the Electric Theater that's there. And again, as we talk about things, one of the things that I want is that whenever anyone interacts with our brand, whether it's on TV, digitally, or especially in person, that they walk away feeling different about Cadillac than when it started. So like, how do you transform? So we have something called the Electric Theater. It's, I don't know if any of you have seen some of the immersive art exhibits, like Van Gogh was one of the first, and in New York, there's been a lot of the very cool ones. I think that it really, it just gives you all the feels. So we created something like that. It's this room that you go into. There's screens on all sides. There's a mirror in the back and screens. The floor is interactive, and we go through the history of Cadillac, the lyric, and then the future. And so that's something that you'll see there and a few other places. Other than that, EV, we've got a lot of EV that's happening, and some announcements coming soon. So stay tuned. Some big things coming in New York.
Okay, we'll stand by for that.
Yeah.
On a broader scale, by the way, we're going to take live questions toward the end, so get them ready. And we're also going to take questions from our live streamed audience, so get those ready. From a larger macro environment perspective, what trends are you seeing right now, from a Cadillac perspective?
This one's such an interesting thing for me. The thing that's on my mind a lot, and it intersects with a few other things. The first thing is, it's like what we all know, right? Like media consumption is getting more and more fractured. So how do I reach people, and how do I reach people at scale? Combine that with identity and cookie deprecation. And I think that as much as I hate cookies going away, I think in the end, it's gonna be one of the big transformative things in our industry. And in our industry, whenever you give us a challenge, there's going to be a lot of really smart people who are going to figure it out. So I think how we solve identity and who figures out how to do that in a more sort of like across the ecosystem way versus these little silos, because everyone will tell you they have identity solved here or here or here, but I need it across. How that ties into measurement, I think, will become very important. But as you start to understand identity, what I think is really interesting that I think is going to happen is, like, just a quick question. How many of you here are tired of how many subscriptions you have? Like, right? Exactly. So, and I don't know if you I listen to Pivot all the time, and Scott Galloway thinks everything should be behind a paywall. I'm like, it's just not going to work. Like, I have enough, and I'm like, it's too much. So I think that these two things are going to intersect. And we just had the Super Bowl, and I'm sure everyone here, right, watches the Super Bowl for the advertising. Consumers don't hate advertising. They don't like bad, disruptive things. If you're entertaining them, if you're doing something, they want advertising. So I think once we understand who people are, and I know who I have the whole US modeled, I know who I want to target. If I can reach them and have some kind of value exchange, and I think that people, like, that's what's going to happen is, like, a lot of people also don't mind sharing their identity in a place where they know it's happening. So how do we create these, like, symbiotic relationships? And so I think that, and it's like, it's not going to happen in the next, like, month or two, but as we look back in a couple of years, I think that's something that we'll have seen a lot of transformation.
Well, in the streaming space, we're seeing saturation and then kind of like a backlash. But I think you're right. I think at some point there's only so many subs one consumer can subscribe to. So at some point, advertising becomes back in vogue, right? Layered with the ability to identify users on a more precise basis. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious to hear what David Berkowitz in the audience thinks of that. So one of the things we try to do in these conversations is let our membership, especially aspiring CMOs, kind of understand the leadership approach of our speakers. So,
Yep.
How would you describe your leadership approach, and how would your team describe you as a leader?
Hopefully they would describe me as inspirational and empathetic. I think the first thing that we have to realize as a leader is, like, I talk a lot about being human, right? Like, I think as people, we forget a lot that we're humans dealing with other humans, right? And, like, we're all going through, you have a bad day, you're going through something, and we all have our own hopes and dreams that we're dealing with all the time. So I think understanding who someone is, what they're trying to achieve, and, like, how that plays into their performance for the day, the month, the year, I think is really important. So I try to really be open and empathetic for that. The other thing that I think as a leader is really key to your job is being inspirational. People need to know what they're working for, and they need to have a filter to put things through. So, like, this year on my team, our mantra is scarcity breeds innovation, because we are, as GM, Mary Barra announced that we're taking $2 billion of cost out. As we're doing that, it doesn't mean we're not going to do the work. And I think that, honestly, we've been leaning too hard on the tools in our toolbox because we know them. So let's figure out new ways. Let's be really innovative. And that you hear people saying it now, it's the filter, so we know, okay, this is something that's going to break through the mold. This is something to do. And it's because I've worked for people who I found to be very inspirational, and I've worked for people who I didn't know what was going in their head. And so, like, you kind of, like, get to the end of the year and you're like, oh, you thought I did well, or, oh, I didn't do what you wanted. Like, I had no idea. So it's important, I think, to, like, have a strong voice.
Well, I think you hit on two key points about leadership, right? One is accessibility, which clearly you are. I know that on a personal basis. But also the inspiration piece, the old saying that people leave managers, they don't leave companies. And I think that's a big part of it, right? Being inspired at work every day, where we spend 70% of our time or more, right? Being inspired by our manager, having a great working relationship, the culture that's built by that leader, right? Makes the world of difference in terms of that person's longevity and happiness and productivity, right?
Absolutely.
It's a productivity thing too,
Yeah.
right? It's not just about being nice. It's about generating, results.
Yeah, it's very interesting for me. I think Mary Barr and then I work for Deborah Wall. They're both very inspirational people. And so I'm inspired every day, and I love what I'm doing, and I see what that does for me. So I try to, like, have that kind of go down too. Yeah.
That's fantastic. One of your in our prep conversations, one of your personal passions is health and wellness.
Yes.
And you're doing some work with Ziva Health.
Yes.
Can you tell the audience about it?
Yeah, so it came to me through this passion point that I have. And what I'll say is health has always been a passion for me. I've always been someone who loved working out. I get a lot of my mental out physically. So that's always been core to who I am and something I've always done. What I learned through life, and a lot of why I talk about it now, is that the wellness side of things I definitely struggled with. And I'll tell you a very personal story, but it was like a moment for me. I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm moving all the time. My brain's moving, I'm moving. And there was a point where I was like very stressed and I was like going. And a friend of mine at work who's Buddhist was like, so have you ever tried meditation? And I was like, I don't think I can do it. Like my brain won't calm down. It won't do it. And she set a meeting with me at 5 o'clock and we went into a conference room and she was like, relax your toes, relax. And I just laughed. I mean, my brain couldn't do it. And it was a fascinating thing to me. I also don't deal well as a person with not being able to do things. So I figured out and I kind of stuck to it. And now I meditate a ton. I like to do things with mantras because I need something to say. I can't just let my mind, there's no watching the clouds. They're like, it turns into a thunderstorm. So but it's one of the reasons why I talk about it a lot, because I struggle with it a lot. And as soon as it starts to go away, like I get in a good place and I'm like in the flow and everything's good. And then if I let it go, I ratchet up and I feel it again. And so, it's one of the things as we talk about work-life balance and and we've got to take the time for these things. We've got to take time to take care of ourselves because, at any point when you've gotten yourself into an unhealthy point, you know how that impacts everything. And so making sure that you're taking care of yourself is so important. So the company that I'm working with now came to me, actually in the pandemic, I did an interview on medium.com with Mr. Activated, who's Parveen Panwar. And we were talking about a lot of the stuff. He started this company, and it's going to be an app that pulls in health data. I wear everything, an Oura Ring, a Fitbit, an Apple Watch. I'm a very data-driven person, so I like to compare them all. It's been fun to have an excuse, and now I have someone to send.
Do you take them off during the meditation phase, or are they all
no, it's the only
competing
thing that makes
competing for your attention? Like, how does that work?
Down.
Okay.
No, so it's so he started this company that's pulling in all the data, but where I think, again, I look at all these things, and I will say this was an interesting thing. Like Aura has taught me something. It taught me I was eating too close to bedtime because I work really late. We make dinner, and then I have to wake up very early because we start early, and I need to work out first. That's how I keep my mental health. So a few times, I'd wake up, and Aura would say, "Your resting heart rate was very high last night. Did you eat too close to bedtime?" And I was like, whoa, how did you know that? And I saw the physiological response, and it actually has, I'm not better yet, but I'm trying, working on it.
Work in progress.
But it's those things, and this is what Ziva will do, is it's to make you the CEO of your own health, to pull everything in. We have a doctor that we're working with. We have, breathing experts, a lot of things. But how do you start to, working with your doctor, but more in an integrative, holistic way? How do you, what do you need to do? So you may see that your glucose is running high if you have a glucose monitor. What do you do then? What are the food combinations? So he's actually helped me because my glucose was spiking. Sometimes he's like, oh, make sure that you're eating a salad with balsamic vinegar. The balsamic vinegar is gonna steady out your blood sugar. Then you want a piece of chocolate? Have a piece of chocolate. So those things, those tips, those little life hacks are going to be all worked into there so the data becomes actionable and you're actually becoming healthier. So I'm very excited about it. We're almost in beta. And it's been really fun for me to work on because it's things that I think about and things that I'm looking at all the time. But now someone's going to make it manifest into something.
It's kind of combining all those passions, those competencies and passions into one.
Yeah.
But I also think, in recent years, because I'm growing up in the industry, I don't think there was a focus on wellness, right? And both physical and mental. And I think
I know.
that's one of the greatest things that's come out of recent years.
Yeah.
That, companies and employers actually thinking about what wellness means to the employee and what it all means to us as functioning humans. So that's great to hear. Let's talk about innovation for a second, from a broader sense. Web3, obviously there's larger macroeconomic dynamics happening right now, but in general, what are you most excited about from a technology perspective, from a platform perspective?
Yeah, so as we look at Web3, the metaverse, all of that, I've been paying very close attention. For me, what's most exciting, and I just talked about the electric theater and this immersive experience, to me, the technology that's going to come out of that and how we're able to use that in our own ecosystems is what's most interesting. I think, we're in Forza, we've been doing some experimentation in Decentraland and other things. So we're looking at what's out there. I'm not sure how much virtual Cadillac will play with such a physical product, but we're always experimenting. When I look at it though, if I could take that experience of walking through and getting in and whatever, if that could be your shopping experience on our website, if that could be your shopping experience on your mobile device, or once you own, I always say this, like I sit there with engineers and designers all day for years before a car comes out. I get in the car, I have an Escalade, I still don't know all the features. And if I don't know how anyone knows how to use the car. So the other thing that I think that's really going to play out in is you start learning in this very immersive way on the desktop, and then you hold up your phone and you're in there, and what is that AR experience? What does that look like, and how does that travel and traverse the whole thing? And I think that's the technology that's being built that's really going to transform the way we as consumers interact. And you can apply that to anything. Like, I'm trying on a dress before I buy it, and how do I really do that and twirl around, and what does it look like? So.
Well, yeah, I think if anything coming out of the pandemic, one of the things that we all appreciate more is in-person live experiences, right? So I think experiential is definitely going to be something that continues. It feels like it's having moderate growth coming out of the pandemic just because of the economic environment, but will definitely be something that will continue to thrive, and things like the metaverse, I think, will enhance and complement it, not replace it, right? So I think what you're saying is exactly right. All right, let's take the first question from the audience. I think we've got a mic somewhere. I see David raise his hand first, so we'll go to David. You might have to turn it on too.
Need to be tech savvy here? Okay. Hi. Well. Thanks for this. So I'm curious for you to dive back to the point. Dealing with budget cuts is something a lot of us are used to, and also opening the paper every day and being like, are we in a recession today? Are we not? Are we going to be a few months from now? No idea what the hell's going on. But you also, clearly things like the Killer Mike partnership and Spotlight, like these don't just happen overnight. So I'm curious what being nimble means to you in this day and age, and just like how your planning process might have been changing when it seems like we never know what's going on, like minute to minute.
So I think that's something that's really, and we're trying to, it's interesting. So going into the pandemic, and in those first couple of months, we used to call it FFA, fast, flexible, and agile. You have to you just got to be able to turn on a dime. You've got to be very flexible about whatever your plans were, and you've got to be agile. So I did something, I learned, now I'm learning, and I'm going to just keep going, right? That's been a little bit of our MO for the past couple of years. At the same time, being very true to the brand. So, with something like where we have a relationship with Killer Mike or Regina King, who's been, a friend of our brand for a long time, and there's several other examples that those become like a bit of the baseline. And the other thing is, as I talked about before, really understanding our brand. There are people that are naturally attracted to the brand because of who we are, and same, So I think if you to kind of parse out those different things, those types of things, they are nurtured over time. Now, we didn't have a ton of planning that came with the Killer Mike thing. It was like, hey, this is coming. We actually are ramping back up because the past couple of years from an automotive perspective have been very contingent on where are semiconductors. And, if you think at the beginning of the pandemic, we stopped production of vehicles for a long time. So there was no money. So we were just like, whoop, pull it out. And then as things started coming back up, same with semiconductors, where are we? And that's where our cash flow is. So having sort of the baseline of knowing who we are as a brand and knowing what we're going to do, but then just being ready to innovate and jump in. Now we're trying to get to a point where we are getting back into a more normal planning cycle and, having some contingencies built in. But it's been an interesting thing. And on the are we in a recession, to me personally, I find it very interesting, right? Because we're not really in a recession. We do seem to be talking ourselves into one, so we'll see where it goes. From a GM perspective, though, we are all in on our EV future. So for us, the cost cutting is about how do we strip out to build the right future as fast as possible. So we're acting for that reason like we're in a recession, but from a macro level, it's an interesting thing to watch.
Another question. Who's got the mic? Okay. Please introduce who you are and then where you're from.
Hi, I'm E.B. Moss with Moss Appeal. Hello again, Melissa. So with homage to Broadsign sponsor, I'm interested in knowing what media vehicles you're embracing a lot. Obviously, you're doing a lot with, cool tools like AR and alignment with personalities, but what are you seeing in the audio space? What are you doing in out of home? Any examples of cool creative and things that you're embracing?
Yeah, I think it's just very. I think there's nothing I would say we're not using right now, and it's very situation dependent. We try to be very contextually relevant in what we're doing, both to the person and to the space that we're in. And I was having a quick TikTok conversation before this of making sure that we've got the right thing there that's going to be very different from anything we do on any other social channel or out of home or anything else, right? So a fun example, since you started with the out of home, a fun example that we did last year for our 120th is we did an out of home campaign in key cities, and we created playlists that were bespoke to that city because Cadillac is the manufacturer that's most named in songs. And so we tapped into that and did a fun campaign. There was a little bit of it that was a little too incognito, so there's some discussion on how well it worked, but it was very fun and I think a good learning experience for us. But we're really kind of, and like I was talking about, media's fractured, right? Where people are, we try to be there.
Thanks. Hi, Rick and Melissa.
Hi.
I'm Jerry with National Cinemedia. Thanks for sharing your experience with delivering transformation to an iconic brand. Two questions for you. One, how did you think about empowering your team to be change agents and to bring that philosophy to work every day? And then what brands did you look to for inspiration?
Good questions. The first one, how did I empower my team? I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I think it's almost, how did my team enable me, right? I've got great people. And when I think about a lot of the key things that we've done, they knew what I was trying to do. They knew what we as Cadillac were trying to do. And people brought me hey, here's how we need to let's talk about Viz ID. And I'm yeah, let's talk about Viz ID. How are we going to do this? Let's talk about the tagline. Let's talk about all these things. So I think that that's the key is get the right people in the right roles. Let them be curious, let them figure things out, and then listen to them. And I think that's been, and I'm super thankful for everyone on my team because I think that's why we've been so successful is because they've all been so smart in the way that they approach this. And then what brands do I look for inspiration? Gosh, I don't have specifics. I look everywhere. I'm just constantly trying to see what people are doing. If I like something, why do I like it? If I don't like it, why don't I like it? what are, the different, we talked a little bit about Gen Z and them liking Cadillac, which is very exciting for me. Now we were one of the fastest growing brands with Gen Z, but with Aldi, I felt very honored to be by Aldi. I love Aldi. And so I think, it's more about understanding who is doing what and how people are reacting to that. What are the cool things that people are doing, so.
It's from the Walt Disney Company. So you mentioned making an impact in culture and aligning with these cultural icons. So I guess I'm wondering, and you also mentioned the U.S. Open as in like a relatively new venture. So which cultural moments and which like specific tentpoles do you see yourself aligning with going forward?
The cultural moments, I think we're looking at that more in I don't want to say like a reactive way, but we're looking at like what's happening in culture and being part of that, right? So like, not the best example, but for the sake of time, like Labyrinth, having that moment and being someone who's really creating and making an impact and has this vision, and us working with him to have his vision, or like Killer Mike, and you see his vision coming to life. I think that's more how we're thinking about culture. So, and then what was the other part of your question? What was the other part?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, which events, which temples? Yeah. That is, we are aligned with the PGA, and I will say with the PGA, one of the things we're really focused on is how do you make golf a more accessible sport? So that's a huge focus for us, and a lot of the activities that we have around golf are focused on that. And then we have the U.S. Open, and Time 100 is the other big tentpole. And Time 100 really matches with us because it's about celebrating people who are making a big impact in the world. And like when we look at our like brand mantra now, and is we exist to champion big dreams and bold ambitions. So if we're about the American dream, how do we lift people up? And so that really aligns.
Very cool. I think we had at least one question up front here. There's two up here, Alicia.
Okay, gotcha. Hi, Melissa. My name is Michelle. I work with Up There Everywhere. It's a digital cloud-based agency. So I have a question regarding like your marketing efforts. I'm wondering like where are you seeing the most success? Like what, is it social? Is it TV? Is it what does success look like? And like I know it sounds like a weird question, but is any of your marketing efforts not measurable?
So it's funny because to like when you said like where you're seeing the most success, it depends on how you're measuring success. And we have different things that we measure at different places. When we look at selling gas-powered internal combustion engine vehicles, we're able to measure that because what we're measuring is when we apply whatever media, how are people converting? And we measure to sales, and we can see that. Addressable TV works really well. Different endemic digital or more shopping type experience work really well. There's a lot of things that you don't measure the same. And so, like I said, one of the things, like something that you, and there's a lot of examples of this, but like something you can't really measure, what is our electric theater doing, right? You can't measure that. But what I said was I want someone to feel different when they walk away from the brand. So we do a survey when people, before they go in and then when they come out. And what we see is impact on brand opinion and what is their brand opinion raises almost 20 points from going in to leaving. Now, is that something that is like, can I run statistical models on that? No. I mean, we did have last year, we probably had 15,000 people who went through it, and that's what we're seeing. So we're measuring something else there. So it just depends what you're measuring. And to me, what's really important is to know what we're measuring or why we're doing something.
Gotcha.
All right, last question.
Hi, Melissa. My name is Allie Kasberg, currently doing freelance work in brand. I am curious, you talk a lot about always learning throughout your career, and I know we don't exactly have a crystal ball, but I have to imagine there's a lot of folks in this room who have aspirations to hit some of the same career milestones you have. So my question for you is, what in your seat right now, do you feel like are 3 critical skills to become a CMO?
3 critical skills. The first thing is you have to understand data and technology. It's a newer thing, I think, for a CMO to need to understand. But as you look at, especially the more that linear TV is decreasing, the less you can lean on those old skills you had. So understanding data and technology is number one. The second one, I think, that's really important is to understand human insight and the why of something. This is, and like if you're a more digitally native person, right, you do a lot of experimentation, you do a lot of A/B tests. Well, if you think about what you're doing, and this is how I explain to people why this is probably the most important skill that you can have. If you have one audience and you hold out a control group and you're treating one group, what are you measuring? You're not measuring the efficacy of the group because that's going to be your control group. How was your targeting? That's going to be the control group. What you're measuring is the efficacy of your creative. How did you connect with that person? And that is one of the most important things that we can do. And it's a skill that I think if you lean too heavily on the data and technology, you'll forget. I think the third thing is going back to like understanding, and it kind of ties into the second one, but it's gonna be how you lead, is like understanding humans and how to interact with humans, how to inspire them. I think it's one of the things that we learned in the pandemic is we don't do well by ourselves and we don't do well on screen. So how are we all gonna interact and how are we gonna make an impact there?
Great kind of last question to wrap up the day. I'll say first, thank you all for coming to the club today to join us for this insightful conversation. Thank you to everyone that dialed in. I want to say, Melissa talked about the importance of inspiration and leadership, and I know I'm walking away from here quite inspired. So let's give Melissa a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back for Conversations With on March 15th with MasterCard. Bye.